Imagine working out in the freezing cold, day after day, pushing your physical limits to the absolute edge. You do the hard work, you do it right, but when it's time to get paid, the people who hired you just vanish. Ghosted. Your entire livelihood is suddenly hanging by a thread. Does your sweat equity even matter to the system? Now, the companies we're talking about today, we're going to call them Harvest Pro and Timberco, which are fictional names. But make no mistake, this explainer is breaking down a very real, incredibly intense legal battle over honest work and unpaid debts. Think about the raw, visceral frustration here. The loggers for Harvest Pro were out there in the elements, just grinding it out in the forest. And a lot of this was running on what was basically a virtual handshake with Timberco. You do the work, we pay the bill. That's how it's supposed to go, right? But the second that massive final bill actually came due, absolute crickets from the corporate side. Suddenly, these workers who had put literal sweat equity into this job had their families' livelihoods put directly on the line. Let's actually map out how this played out. From September right through November of 2022, it was just nonstop, grueling forest labor. Felling trees, hauling massive timber, the whole shebang. Fast forward a few months to June 2023, and Harvest Pro finally sends over that final invoice to settle up the remaining roadside measurements. The response they got in July? Complete, deafening corporate silence. They were totally ignored. And then came the sudden betrayal. When Timberco finally decided to respond, they just flat out rejected the invoice. No negotiation, no explanation. Their stance was basically, hey, we paid what we owed. Anything else you're asking for, you're just making it up. They literally argued that the previous payments they made were the final, 100% settled amount, and they never agreed to a single further payment. The court did not focus on emotion. It asked one key legal question. Did the digital evidence prove a hidden agreement? So here is the absolute core of the conflict. You have two totally opposing stories. On one side, Harvest Pro is claiming, look, those initial bills we sent, those were just a 90% placeholder. We based them on the machine data, but we were waiting on the manual measurements for the final 10%. But on the other side, Timberco is digging their heels in, insisting that those exact same bills represented the complete 100% final agreement. But here's the thing about modern business. You leave an undeniable digital footprint. And this is where it gets really interesting. Step 1. The harvester machine prints out the raw data as a PDF. Step 2. Harvest Pro takes that data and creates an electronic invoice, an e-doc with a secure signature. And crucially, it includes a very clear 90% clause. Step 3. Timberco receives that exact electronic invoice and they pay it. The email timestamps proved all of this happened in that exact, unchangeable order. Well, during the dispute, Timberco made a pretty massive mistake. They actually submitted their own paper versions of the invoices, hoping to sway the legal system. But there was a highly suspicious discrepancy. Their copies, which happened to be unsigned, miraculously had zero mention of that 90% placeholder clause. It was like it had just been wiped out. And this brings us to an incredibly satisfying moment in the case. The authorities pulled Timberco's bank records, and they showed a wire transfer for exactly 11,370 euros. Now, why does that matter? Because that number was a flawless, down-to-the-cent match to Harvest Pro's original, digitally signed 90% e-doc. That one bank record completely dismantled Timberco's forged paper documents in one fell swoop. You just can't argue with bank records. To put the final nail in the coffin, they did the forensic math. It's actually kind of beautiful how perfectly it lines up. They took the raw memory straight from the harvester machine and compared it to the invoices. For example, in area KL, the machine logged exactly 459.2 cubic meters of wood. The invoice, 413.28. If you run the numbers, that is exactly 90%. And this exact mathematical relationship held completely true across every single forest area they checked. The 90% agreement was mathematically proven to the exact decimal. Of course, Timberco had one last desperate defense. They tried to argue, well, the logging machinery wasn't officially calibrated to government standards anyway, but that got dismissed almost immediately. Why? Because Timberco themselves were the ones who actually blocked the final manual roadside measurements from happening in the first place. You can't prevent the final measurement and then complain that the preliminary measurement wasn't official enough. And this all comes down to a really fundamental legal principle: good faith. Basically, the law requires parties to act honestly and fairly when they make an agreement. A company absolutely cannot rely on minor technicalities or manufacture artificial delays or forge paperwork just to get out of paying for undeniable, physically executed labor. It just doesn't work that way. So what was the final resolution? The legal system stepped in and ordered Timberco to pay up. They were ordered to pay the full remaining debt for that final 10% of the harvest. Plus, they were hit with all the accumulated late payment interest, and they had to cover all the legal and recovery costs directly to the loggers. A complete win for the workers. Ultimately, this case leaves us with a powerful reality check about how things actually work today. Digital footprints outlast denied handshakes. No matter what agreements are broken or what is denied in person, the truth of an agreement is permanently etched into the digital metadata left behind. So, when it comes down to it and your livelihood is on the line, is your digital paper trail as solid as your physical hard work? One decision changed everything. Watch the next case right here and subscribe for more real stories.